Hi, how are you going? Well, we move into double figures today. 10, and they said we'd never make it. I should apologize in advance, as I have a bit of a frog in my throat today. As a result, my voice isn't as angel-like as it usually is. Today, we're going to discuss lesson planning. We can't just walk into class without a plan, just like you can't play a game of football or chess without a plan. Well, I guess we could, but we just wouldn't do very well. So we're going to have a look at what tips our textbook gives us for lesson planning, so we'll get pretty good at it. Are you ready? Here we go. As always, our objectives are pretty straightforward. I hope you'll learn a bit about how to lesson plan, but also be willing to find some weaknesses in a lesson plan and think about ways it could be improved. Too easy. Our plan for this lesson looks like this. Again, it's very simple and easy to follow. We'll probably spend a bit longer on the third point, but overall, I don't expect it will take us too long to get through this one. Let's start off with a discussion like we usually do. I would like you to think about your everyday lives. Are you the kind of person who plans everything out carefully? Or are you spontaneous and make decisions on the spur of the moment? Of course, it will depend on the situation, right? Think about your answers and some examples, and let's have a good discussion in class. Now, I will be the first to admit that lesson planning can be a bit of a pain from time to time. However, we need to go to class knowing exactly what we are going to do and where we want to be at the end. It does take time, but with experience, you'll find yourself planning your classes like a champion. Now, there are plenty of things we need to be thinking about when we plan our lessons. The list on page 197 of our books is pretty comprehensive and worth having a look at. Considering these kinds of factors when planning will help you know what is going on in your class. And when you know what is happening, it makes you a better teacher. When you are a better teacher, your students will learn more. And that, my friends, is what education is all about. So now that we know how important it is to properly plan a lesson, we can have a look at what we need to plan. It's not just about the 45 or 50 minutes or however long your lesson is. There are other factors to consider. First, we need to remember our overall goal. What are we trying to do in our course? And how does this lesson fit into that big goal? Then we have the objectives. Generally, goals and objectives kind of have the same meaning, but in the field of education, they are a little different. As we see on page 198, objectives refer to what students will be able to do. It's not about you, but about the students. As part of our objectives, we don't say, students will learn about blah blah blah. We need to say what they will be able to do, like, students will be able to order food at a restaurant. As you can see on page 199, the objective I have just mentioned is a terminal objective. If you are talking about how the students will get there, you are referring to the enabling objective. Next, you need to know what kinds of materials and equipment you need. These include, for example, books and audio-visual materials. We'll talk more about these in chapters 11 and 12. The procedures is what most people think of when they talk about lesson planning. There are so many ways to go about it, we can't get into it here. But just about every lesson plan will follow the same procedure. A warm-up, sets of activities, and a cool-down. We've talked about PPP and PPPP before. Both of these structures follow this basic procedure. I really like what is written at the end of this part. I really think we always need to have a what-if plan. What are you going to do if you finish earlier than planned? What are you going to do if you realize you don't have enough time? Having a what-if plan is essential because no lesson ever goes exactly to plan. And if your lesson does go exactly to plan, then your lesson plan is wrong. Fifth, we have assessment. We'll talk more about assessment in chapters 20 and 21. But as a spoiler, it'd be good for you to remember that in education circles, test and assessment are different. Tests are what you give your students to come up with a final score. Assessment is a lot broader and includes those times when you listen to your students and think, wow, she has really good pronunciation, or, oh, he still doesn't get the difference between much and many. In your classes, make sure you give your students enough opportunities to use the language, so you'll be able to assess how successful they are in using it. Finally, we have everyone's favorite, extra class work, or homework. The author of our textbook doesn't like the word homework because students don't necessarily do the work at home. Personally, I prefer homework because it's easier to say. Anyway, we need to think of something for students to do outside of the classroom. This way, we can take our lessons into students' everyday lives. However, some people don't agree with the idea of giving students homework. They prefer the students to be a little autonomous and work out what they need to do for themselves. This leads me to our next discussion. As students, I'm sure you love it when your teacher doesn't give you homework. But what do you think about homework? Is it beneficial? For homework, extra class work, I'd like you to prepare your opinion about homework. Is it beneficial? If yes, why? If not, how can teachers give more meaning to the homework they give their students? Let's have a meaningful discussion about this, because it is a topic you'll need to think about carefully when you lead the classroom in the future. Right, next we want to have a look at the actual process of planning the lesson. There are 8 steps described in our book. Let's have a look at each one very, very briefly. 1. The first thing you need to do is decide what to teach. If you are using a textbook and are part of a team, you probably won't have much choice here. But still, you can think about the objectives for your lesson and how they will fit into the overall picture. 2. When thinking about how you're actually going to teach the lesson, you need to think about having some variety in what you do, the sequence or order of your activities, the pace of your lesson, and timing. Timing is really important, but you still need to be flexible. And remember to have the what-if plan ready just in case you need it. 3. As I said, we need to be flexible. Things aren't always going to go as we had hoped. There will be a couple of times when the class goes off the topic. So have a contingency plan, not contingency pan as it says in the book. So you'll be able to get the class back on track if needed. 4. Make sure you check the difficulty. You don't want to be teaching at a level that's too difficult or too easy. Aiming for a level that is just a little above where the students are at is perfect. During class, continually assess the students' progress and judge whether you need to make any changes. 5. Now, of course, all our students are going to be different, so it's difficult to decide the exact level to teach at, right? But there's even more to consider. Students learn in different ways, at different paces, and have different interests. Design your activities throughout the course to match the differences among your students. Number 6. Well, number 6 needs no introduction because I say it all the time. Teachers talk too much. Think about ways to reduce your TTT and increase the STT. Number 7. In the last chapter, we talked about the curriculum. It's important for you to review and be aware of those ideas we discussed back in chapter 9, so you'll be able to see how your lesson fits into the plan of the entire course. And finally, we look at your classroom notes. It's a good idea to have a piece of paper with some notes on it about what you want to do during your lesson. This way, you'll be able to keep on track the whole time. Well, that was our second big slide for the day, but we have just about finished for this chapter. The final part is actually an assignment for you. More homework, extra classwork. I would like you to look through the sample lesson plan on pages 208 to 216. Have a good look through, and I would like you to make a critical analysis of the lesson plan. When I say critical analysis, I mean I expect you to talk about the strong points and why they are strong, and weak points and how you would improve those points. We should always be doing this for our own lessons, so this is a good place to start getting into that habit. Okay, that is about it for today. Thanks for sticking around until the end. Once again, I apologize for my terrible voice. I hope everything goes well as you prepare for class, and I'll see you soon.